On an October evening in 1978, a young pilot flew his small plane out over the sea. Then he radioed that something strange was hovering above him. He said it was orbiting his aircraft, that it was playing a game with him. His last words were that it was not an aircraft. Then came a strange metallic sound. And then silence. The pilot and his plane vanished completely and were never found. This is the vanishing of Frederick Valentich. Welcome to Curio Hour, where we uncover the strange, the unsolved, and the unforgettable. Today's story: the vanishing of Frederick Valentich. The year was 1978, and the place was the state of Victoria in southern Australia. Our story centers on a young man named Frederick Valentich. Frederick was 20 years old, and he loved to fly. Flying was his great passion, and his dream was to one day become a professional pilot with an airline. He was a dedicated and enthusiastic aviator, working hard to build up his flying hours and qualifications. He was relatively inexperienced but deeply committed. Frederick was also, by some accounts, fascinated by the subject of unidentified flying objects. He took the idea of strange craft in the sky seriously. On the evening of October the 21st, 1978, Frederick planned a training flight. He would fly a small single-engine plane, a Cessna, on a route over the water. His destination was King Island, a small island sitting in the Bass Strait, the stretch of open sea that separates mainland Australia from the island of Tasmania. The flight would take him out over the dark waters of the strait, a lonely stretch of sea, as the evening light faded into night. Frederick took off in the early evening, in good weather, with clear skies. The conditions for flying were excellent. Everything began entirely normally. He flew out over the coast and headed across the Bass Strait toward King Island, maintaining radio contact with air traffic control on the mainland. For a while, everything proceeded exactly as it should, with nothing to suggest the strange turn the night was about to take. At around 7 in the evening, as he flew over the water, Frederick called the flight service officer he was in contact with, a man named Steve Roby. What followed was a radio conversation that has become one of the most famous and chilling recordings in aviation history. It lasted only a few minutes, but in those minutes, a routine training flight turned into something no one has ever been able to fully explain. Frederick's first question was strange. He asked the officer whether there was any other known aircraft in his area, flying at his altitude. The officer checked and replied that there was no known traffic in that area. As far as the authorities were aware, Frederick was alone in the sky. But Frederick was not convinced he was alone. He reported that a large aircraft seemed to be flying above him, perhaps 1,000 feet over his head. The officer again said there was no known traffic. And then Frederick's reports began to grow stranger and more urgent. He described the craft as having 4 bright lights, like landing lights that would shine and then suddenly vanish. The object seemed to be moving at great speed. He said it had passed over him at least 1,000 feet above, moving far faster than his own plane could go. It was, he said, approaching him from the east. Then the object seemed to play with him. Frederick reported that it was orbiting above him, circling his small plane in the darkening sky. His voice on the recording grew tense and confused. He struggled to describe what he was seeing. It was not behaving like any aircraft he knew. He said the thing had a shiny metal surface and that it was reflecting light. He described a green glow coming from it. It was unlike anything in his experience. Then Frederick reported a new and frightening problem. His engine was beginning to run roughly, coughing and sputtering as if something were wrong. The officer asked him to confirm his intentions. Frederick said he was going to try to continue on to King Island, but the strange craft was still hovering nearby. The officer, growing concerned, asked Frederick to confirm the kind of aircraft he was looking at. And Frederick gave the reply that has echoed ever since. He said it is not an aircraft. Those 4 words, spoken in genuine confusion and unease, are among the most haunting ever recorded by a pilot. And then, immediately after those words, something happened to the radio transmission. A strange sound came through. A metallic scraping noise. Witnesses who later heard the recording described it as an unidentified metallic, scraping sound lasting for several seconds, drowning out Frederick's voice. And then the radio went dead. The transmission cut off completely. The officer called out for Frederick again and again. There was no reply. Frederick Valentich, his strange encounter, and his small plane had simply vanished from the sky over the Bass Strait in an instant. The flight service officer immediately raised the alarm. Something had gone terribly wrong out over the dark water, and a young pilot was missing. The clock was ticking. If Frederick's plane had gone down into the cold sea, every minute mattered. A rescue effort was launched without delay. A major search began that night and continued for days. Aircraft and ships scoured the Bass Strait, searching the area where Frederick had last been heard. The search covered a vast area of open sea. Rescuers looked for wreckage, for an oil slick, for any sign at all of the missing plane. But they found nothing. No wreckage, no debris, no oil slick, no body. The plane and its pilot had vanished without leaving a single trace. This itself was deeply puzzling. When a small plane crashes into the sea, it usually leaves something behind. Floating debris, a fuel slick, scattered wreckage. Yet the Bass Strait gave up nothing. It was as though Frederick and his Cessna had been plucked clean out of the sky. Years later, a small piece of an engine cowling washed ashore and was investigated to see if it came from Frederick's plane. The results were inconclusive. It could not be definitively linked to his aircraft. And so, even that faint clue led nowhere certain. The disappearance remained as complete as ever. The official investigation could not determine what had happened. Its conclusion was simply that the cause of the disappearance was unknown. In the absence of an answer, the theories rushed in. The most down-to-earth explanation is that Frederick became disoriented in the dark. Some experts suggested that the young, inexperienced pilot may have become confused, flying upside down without realizing it, and seen the reflection of his own lights on the water. In this theory, the strange craft with 4 lights was simply his own aircraft, mirrored in the sea below, as he flew inverted toward the water and crashed. It is a plausible explanation, and it would account for the engine trouble and the sudden end. But it does not satisfy everyone, and it leaves some details unexplained. Others have suggested that Frederick may have staged his own disappearance, or simply suffered an ordinary mechanical failure. But no evidence supports these ideas. And then, of course, there are those who take Frederick's final words at face value, who believe he truly encountered something in the sky that night that he could not explain. Reports came in from other people who claim to have seen strange lights in the sky over that part of Australia around the same time. But none could be confirmed, and in a case already heavy with mystery, they added more questions than answers. What we are left with is the recording. A calm flight that turned within minutes into confusion, fear, and that final, chilling phrase. It is not an aircraft. Frederick Valentich was never found. No certain wreckage was ever recovered. And the question of what he saw or thought he saw in the skies over the Bass Strait has never been answered. A young man who loved to fly, who took off one clear evening and simply never came back. The Vanishing of Frederick Valentich.